Welcome back to the channel, the Sane Society. This is your host, 10 o'clock Scholar, for another reading from Eric Fromm's book by that name. We continue on page 25. I think this is part 4. Suppose that in our Western cultures, movies, radios, television, sports, events, and newspapers cease to function for only 4 weeks. With these main avenues of escape closed, what would be the consequence for people thrown back upon their own resources? I have no doubt that even in this short time, thousands of nervous breakdowns would occur, and many more thousands of people would be thrown into a state of acute anxiety, not different from the picture which is diagnosed clinically as neurosis. If the opiate against the social pattern defect were withdrawn, the manifest illness would make its appearance. The opiate is speaking of people who are addicted to these things, these distractions, movies, radios, sports, TVs. He's basically saying that if you couldn't watch your TV or had access to your cell phone or a movie or a game, he's basically saying you're gonna go crazy. This society will make you feel like something's wrong with you if you don't have an avenue for escape. So that's all these things do, provide an avenue for you to escape. And people who withdrawn from them, they have a nervous breakdown because they don't know how to cope outside of those addictions. That's what's being said. If the opiate against the socially patterned defect were withdrawn, the manifest illness would make its appearance. For a minority, the pattern provided by the culture does not work. There are often those whom individual defect is more severe than that of the average person, so that the culturally offered remedy are not sufficient to prevent the outbreak of manifest illness. A case in point is the person whose aim in life is to attain power and fame. While this aim is in itself a pathological one, there is nevertheless a difference between the person who uses his power to attain this aim realistically and the more severely sick one who has so little emerged from his infantile grandiosity that he does not do anything toward the attainment of his goal, but waits for a miracle to happen, and thus feeling more and more powerless, ends up in a feeling of futility and bitterness. But there are also those whose character structure and hence whose conflict differ from those of the majority, so that the remedies which are effective for most of their fellow men, are of no help to them. Among this group, we sometimes find people of greater integrity and sensitivity than the majority, who for their very reason are unacceptable of accepting the cultural opiates, while at the same time they are not. they are not strong and healthy enough to live soundly against the stream. What's being said here is that, you know, some people just don't know how to cope with the structure of society, the way it's set up. And unlike those who have these distractions, these opiates to keep them away from themselves, these people are very sensitive and they're not going to settle for these opiates. They want something that's real. And these are the people who are very candidates for real psychological help because they don't go along with the flow. They just can't. Their 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 their, uh, their character is not made like that to go along with society, to have these escapes. And at the same time, don't have the strength to yeah, they lack the strength, so to say, to go against the flow. Because they say here, go against the stream, because that's what they're doing. They are totally in disagreement with everything that's happening in society. They don't get along. They don't go along with it. They see the veil, so to speak. They see the hypocrisy. Recently, there's people talking about. This is a commentary, by the way. I have commentary on my readings because I don't know the reading level of a lot of you. You may just sound like I'm just calling words. So I do my commentary for those of you who really want to understand what's being read. And then solidify it also in my own mind so I can recall it when needed, or just to have the clearness of vision, of the clarity. So, let's continue. I need to get me some more glasses. Hold on 1 minute. I know I'm coming up kind of choppy. That's because I got different glasses. Some I like better than the others. Some are more comfortable. Okay, I think this is gonna be a lot better. Okay, let's continue for a few more minutes. Let me leave off that. Did I say 15? Yeah, 15. I really lost my place, y'all. Was I on? I was on 25. Yeah, that's where I was. Okay, page 25. It is true indeed that man, in contrast to the animal, shows an almost infinite malleability. Just as he can eat almost anything, live under practically any kind of climate, and adjust himself to it, there's hardly any psychic condition which he cannot endure and under which he cannot carry on. He can live free and as a slave, rich and in luxury, and under conditions of half starvation. He can live as a warrior and peacefully, as an exploiter and robber, and as a member of a cooperating and loving fellowship. There's hardly a psychic state in which man cannot live, and hardly anything which cannot be done with him, and for which he cannot be used. All these considerations seem to justify the assumption that there is no such thing as a nature common to all men. That would mean, in fact, there is no such thing as a species man, except in a psychological and anatomical sense. So what's being talked about in this paragraph is the uh, the malleability of man, his man's ability to adjust is beyond anything imaginable. He's able to live as a slave. He can live under a rock. He can live deprived of all the things that most people consider essential to life. Just think of someone living 20 years in solitary. What keeps that man going? How can he do that? This shows you the power and nature of man. So people would take that power, knowing how they can live under any circumstances and use it against them. You know, oppress a whole people, oppress whole society because they know they're not going to rebel against it. They're going to live. They're going to adjust. They know that. Most societies adjust to whatever come their way because that's the way man is made. And then the only exception is that unless something is physically wrong with them, where they can't do that. That's it in a nutshell, what's being talked about. So let's do one more paragraph. Yet in spite of all this evidence, the history of man shows that he have omitted one fact. Despots and ruling cliques can succeed in dominating and exploiting their fellow man, but they cannot prevent reactions to this inhuman treatment. Despots, people who just rule with an iron fist, so to say, they would get you to adjust to whatever they're doing, but these people cannot get you to rebel. I mean, they can dominate you and exploit you, and like we just read, people adjust to that. But there's always going to be a reaction by some people who are not going to adjust to being treated inhuman. That's just human nature. Their subjects become frightened, suspicious, lonely, and if not due to external reasons, their system collapses at some point because fear, suspicion, and loneliness eventually incapacitates the majority of functional effectively and intelligently. Let's read that again so I can understand it. Now he's speaking about those who don't go for the okie-doke of a despot ruler, a slave driver. Their subjects become frightened, suspicious, lonely, and if not due to external reasons, their system collapses at some point because fear, suspicion, and loneliness eventually incapacitates the majority to function effectively and intelligently. So what's being said is that eventually you can have a society collapse because people can go through that injustice for so long. They adjust to it for so long. There's a time limit on despots, people who abuse and dominate and exploit their fellow man. that's not going to go on forever. There's always a time limit on that. Whole nations are social. Continue. Whole. You can tell when I'm. You should be able to tell when I'm. Uh, what's the word? Commentating, commentary, or when I'm reading. You should be able to tell when I'm reading. It's more of a serious tone, more of a flow. When I'm commentating, when I'm giving commentary, I'm more light. It's more off the cuff. There's no. I'm just coming from the heart, speaking from the heart. Okay, let's continue reading. Whole nations or social groups within them can be subjugated and exploited for a long time, but they react. They react with apathy or such impairment of intelligence, initiative, and skill that they gradually fail to perform the functions which should serve their rulers. Or they react by the accumulation of such hate and destructiveness as to bring about an end to themselves, their rulers, and their system. Again, their reaction may cause such independence and keeping and longing for freedom that a better society is built upon their creative impulses. Which reaction occurs depend on many factors, on economic and political ones, and on the spiritual climate in which people live. But whatever the reactions are, the statement that man can live under almost any condition is only half true. It must be supplemented by the other statement that if he lives under conditions which are contrary to his nature and to the basic requirements for human growth and sanity, he cannot help reacting. He must either deteriorate and perish or bring about a condition that are more in accordance with his needs. That human nature and society can have conflicting demands, and hence that its whole society can be sick. Let's read that sentence again. I think you follow me now. Most of y'all are very intelligent. He must either deteriorate and perish or bring about conditions which are more in accordance with his needs. Okay? So continue reading. What are his needs? These are his needs. That human nature and society can have conflicting demands, and hence that a whole society can be sick, is an assumption which was made very explicitly by Freud, most extensively in his Civilization and Its Discontents. This is Freud, what he's talking about. He starts out with the premise of a human nature common to the human race throughout all culture and ages, and of certain assertability, needs, and surviving inherent in that nature. He believes that culture and civilization develop in an ever-increasing contrast to the needs of man, and thus he arrives at the concept of the social neurosis. Now we got to talk about Freud. We can talk a lot about Freud and his concepts, because oh boy, these people piece of work. Anyway, that concludes the reading for today. I hope you got something out of it that can help you adjust to this sane, to be one of the Sane Society members. Otherwise, yeah, good luck to you. You got to know where you are and where you're living in, and you either adjust, adapt to it, and come up with a plan to free yourself from it, or perish.